Okay, so we're going to do the permaculture principles now. Remember I was saying earlier on, so in the conception of permaculture, the development of this kind of like framework for designing land based on ecological principles. Holmgren and Bill Mollison, they pulled out kind of principles, or like, and they're divided here the way I'm going to teach them into 12 different principles, but they're divided I think into like 6 and 6. So the first 6 especially are like attitudinal principles, and the second 6 have a bit more to do with project management. And I've kind of wrestled for a long time in like what the best way to teach these is, because there's definitely a bunch of crossover between them. So I'm actually just going to do it with really what we did when we got this land, and we made so many mistakes actually, but I think having these principles, having like internalized them, stopped us making like any really big mistakes in a way. All right, so first one is observe and interact. Remember, we're trying to design healthy ecosystems that meet our needs, that are productive. So observing is really important. Observing your land and observing the wider things that are going on around you. One of the first things we did when we got this land was built that stupid shack, hooked up water, and started living on the land. That allowed us to get up early every morning. You saw that shack, it's not the type of place you'd sleep in, but it meant that I could get up every morning and see the sunrise and see how the property felt at different times during the day, and start to make like decisions. Like, and it's something I really recommend. Observing as well with as clear a mind as possible is a good thing to do. Like, you know, oh, it's sunny over here, oh, it's kind of cool and damp and moist over here, and just starting to take notes and let information kind of come in is a really good thing to do, especially at the start of any project, but really the whole way through it. And it's where all design begins and comes back to all the time. Observing, interacting, doing things, learning, and doing more things. So that was one of the first things we did, and it was one of the best. You know, it also, you know, if you have a piece of land and you can build a cheap structure on it, it means you're not paying rent. It means you're like, all the money you have, you can put it into that land and develop a kind of an intimate connection with the piece of land you're working on. All right, principle number 2, capture and store energy. This course, but again, going back to the thing, we're trying to design ecosystems. The fundamental thing that differentiates ecosystems from how healthy they are, how stable they are, how productive they are, how much life they support, is how much energy they store, right? And I'll come back to this point over and over again, but you want to start seeing healthy ecosystems as just large storages of energy. A forest is just a huge storage of sunlight and water, and that primary input of energy is just cycled over and over again, and that's why it's able to support so much life. So start storing energy. So what were some things you saw, the photo shoots there? What were some energy storing tactics that we did early, that you saw early in the project? Pond. It was a mud pit. So dig a hole at the top of your property if it's reasonably flat. That's a good, you can't go too far wrong in that. Then every time it rains, the pond fills up. A lot of the water will seep into the ground and get held by plants, but you're increasing the sort of value of your property when you put ponds on it. You're increasing its capacity to harvest energy. We planted a lot of trees. You saw there, like that fence line used to be like bare and naked, and it was like, oh, the garden's kind of nice. But when we got like really nice shade and flowers and things growing along the edges. That's just energy harvesting. Those plants are harvesting the sun's energy. They're dropping them in leaves. You see all these massive amounts of leaves that like get swept down underneath here. That's all energy harvesting, and it's all stuff that you can't really go wrong with. Goats. We got goats. We wanted to garden, we wanted to grow food here. And it was very obvious immediately that all we had was like shitty rocky soil. No chance of growing anything. We got goats, and you saw there we started to put the hay out underneath the goats to stop so it didn't smell bad. But what we're actually doing is the hay is mixing with the poop of the goats, and it's allowing us to build soil, right? And after we got the goats, we got the chickens. We started to like really make compost en masse. That was one of the first products that this farm had was compost. So capture and store energy. There's a lot of ways to do it, and it's a very fundamental thing, and it's something you can do without radically altering the design of your place, right? Like just planting early nitrogen fixing, biomass producing plants, getting some animals and building. You saw like with the goats, it was like a kind of a temporary structure. They don't live there anymore, they've gone somewhere else, but it's like they allowed us to build fertility, right? Next one, obtain a yield. Umpteen photos in that slideshow of us obtaining yields and getting really excited about it. So, you know, one of the first things we started doing was producing and selling food. You grow salads, get goats, and you know, at the very start we were like, we figured out how to make cheese and yogurt, and we got it into packages, and we sent it over to San Marcos, and we were able to pay a couple of salaries with that money. But it like encouraged us to keep going, and it also, it's very gratifying when you start, you know, drinking milk and eating greens that are grown on your land. It like gives you that sort of emotional and physical sustenance to keep going. So obtain a yield, and that's kind of like while you're capturing and storing energy, you should be then, with the extra energy that you have in the place, yields should start to come from that. That's another way of looking at it. You know, it's like you get goats, you start making a bunch of manure and then compost. You then should be able to turn that compost into a yield in the form of like a vegetable, and you should also be able to like use the excess energy that the goats harvest when they go out walking out here and turn it into milk. And you should be able to figure out systems for those things. And the next one is place self-regulation and accept feedback. So this is like do something based on kind of first principles. You know, the goat, we'll stick with the goats as an example here, right? It's like, okay, the goats they're going out there every day, they're browsing for food in the valley, they're bringing that food back in their stomachs, they're pooping it out. That's allowing us to build fertility in the site. We start milking them, that's the yield we're getting. But it doesn't like work that well at the start. Like you saw the house we built, we then had to like, we were like, they keep getting sick. It's like, well, because they're drinking water from like an open container, like you spotted there. Not a good idea. I told them 2 hours ago to bring up a replacement for that. Actually, they never did. It's because they, you know, so we hooked up waters with little nipples on them, and then we had too much pressure in the line, so the heads kept blowing off the nipples. So we put in a pressure regulator, right? And then they were still not doing super great, so we read a bunch of books, and we got supplements, slow release copper tablets, sodium bicarbonate, and we came up slowly over the course of 2 or 3 years with a whole system for the goats when they were living there. And then when it was kind of like, this is working, then we kind of went like, okay, let's scale this. And it's working, but they're too close to where we eat and sleep, so let's build a bigger house for them now with all the features that we know it needs, right? So doing it slowly allowed us to kind of like build an intelligent system. Next one is use and value renewable resources. You know, there's a bunch of ways of interpreting this. We hooked the whole property up once we got our pond systems hooked up and our ability to like hold more water on the property. We put a hose way up the valley here in the river, so now we have like water dumping onto the property. That's a renewable resource here in Sunderland. That river runs all year. We hooked up solar panels, so all our electricity comes from solar energy. It took us a few years before we did that. But I started to see creativity as being like the ultimate renewable resource, and so we started a business that doesn't just depend on like the somewhat finite amount of like eggs and milk and salads that we can get out here, and our main business actually became design and consultancy. And so we got some way into the project, we decided to get really serious about doing that, so that we had a kind of like a stable base to build off. So, you know, like I said, that's an obvious one in some ways, like value renewable energies, and like it's also totally fine to use non-renewables to set up renewable systems, right? Like I think that's something some people struggle with. It's totally fine, in my opinion, to get a bunch of diggers and you know, excavators and machinery that use combustibles to set your land up to be able to capture and store more energy. And you absolutely want to do that on a big piece of land. What you don't want to do is like depend all the time on it. You want to bring that stuff in, make alterations to the landscape so that your overall dependence on non-renewable energies goes down, right? And that's something we've done actually in a lot of our other projects. We had, you know, for example, one project that we designed in Antigua, there was no water on the project, so no access to river water, spring water, anything like that. And what we did was we brought in this big machinery and we dug out these huge, you know, 300,000 litre ponds using the machinery, and now that project, it's like a water independent, it's fed, the whole project is fed off rainwater. So that would be kind of an example of how that works. All right, produce no waste. Again, this is like, this is a fundamental characteristic of all healthy ecosystems. They don't produce waste because the output of one thing is the input of something else. That's how a healthy ecosystem, that's how symbiotic relationships develop in a healthy ecosystem. And we want our farms, our businesses, our initiatives, whatever they are, to have that basic tenet attached to them. But there's more to it than that. It's like once you what you're doing when you eliminate waste is you're closing loops, right? So you're making sure that any input like never leaks out of your property, right? So like, and what you end up setting up in you know, like we have all these different elements to our farm here, right? We have multiple gardens, we have a restaurant, we have a bar, we have goats, chickens, pigs. So there's all these, and each one of those systems, again, it's like a hold-on. It's a thing. The goats are a hold-on by themselves, but they are connected to all these other things in the farm. And so what you want to slowly develop with this like produce no waste process is you want to make sure that, you know, the output from the waste from the restaurant gets used, and hopefully gets used multiple times, right? Because that's again what would happen in a healthy ecosystem. So what happens with our restaurant is the food waste goes down and it gets split between the chickens and the pigs, but it also encourages the chickens and the pigs to dig and mix the compost, and so whatever they don't eat breaks down and is, feeds the bugs and the worms, and eventually goes back to the garden, which now has like more fertility because it's getting more energy, and then the waste, the what's produced in the garden goes back to the kitchen. Anything that's wasted in the garden, like one thing I'm always on to the girls about is like nothing. Talk to the guys, talk to the farmers, make sure that like if the arugula goes past the point of being usable for a nice fresh salad, that it goes into a green pesto. Like, and when you do that stuff, you slowly, it's like bringing up the water table of your land or of your business, because as you eliminate waste streams and you turn them into resources, your running costs go down, and the like net energy in your system goes up, right? So like the real idea here is like nothing is waste per se, or like nothing is intrinsically a waste product, and nothing is intrinsically a contaminant. Things only become contaminants when they overload the capacity of the system to use them. So design your system so that all waste products can be used. Like Ava was asking me earlier on about what do we do with our poopy water, and I was showing her it's a system we'll talk about later on in the thing. It's like, well, it goes through a septic system where the solids crash out of it, and then it goes into an underground irrigation system, and it gets turned into bananas. It's like, great, now we have bananas. All right, so now that's the first 6, and like I say, these are slightly different from the second 6 in that they're like attitudinal. They're things that you want to kind of like incorporate and embody, and you just want to like work them into your sort of like psyche in a sense, and start using them in how you approach any problem. The second 7 are a bit more related to, they're somewhat attitudinal as well, but they're slightly more related to how you would approach a design project. So first one is design from patterns to details. Big patterns. Think about those before you think about anything small. So again, you can go back to like the goats where we're concerned. It's like the 2 big patterns here, or 2 of the big patterns that are like inescapable. There's a wet season, there's a dry season. That's always, and it will always be like that. There's a high season and there's a low season. The high season is in dry season, the low season is in rainy season. So, well, how does that affect the goats? Well, quite a lot, because if you've got goats, you want them to be pregnant for part of the year and producing milk for another part of the year. So it's like, well, I'd like most of them to not be pregnant and to be producing milk in high season. It's like, all right. But there's more food available in rainy season. There's more forage available in rainy season. So it's like, okay, so that's good to know. So then when we're designing the system for the goats, it's like I need to have dry feed ready for dry season when there's less food available, and I want them to be producing milk. And it doesn't, that's actually totally fine. It works quite well. And so what we do is we bring a male in around April or May to get most of the herd pregnant, so that they're giving birth in around October. And that means they have all this available forage for them to like eat and like feed their little babies. And then when their babies are born, we have about a month to let the moms and the young kids be together, and then we can start separating so that we have like peak milk production coming into high season. That's the idea anyway. And then some way around now, the forage starts to dry up because it hasn't been raining for the last couple of months, so we need to have like more dry feed available for those months so that their production doesn't drop off. So there's like quite a lot of things to think about there in designing that system, but you base it entirely off the big permanent patterns, right? And like everything is like that. And like I design things for a living, and so I continually come across people who are like fussing about details before they've thought about, like the sort of like, what color are my bathroom tiles going to be, before thinking about like how's the light going to move through this room at different times of the year. You know, you can always change the color of the tiles. Okay, integrate, don't segregate. Practically speaking, how we produce no waste is with integrated systems, right? So, you know, we have, like, you'll go down and see it later on today, but we have like quite a neat system with we have like our goats up here. Then down here we have another house with where the chickens live, and then down here we have another house where the pigs are. And goat manure especially, the goats poop, cover it over with hay. Then they poop again, we put more hay down, we put hay down every day. That stops it smelling bad, and it's how we start to build fertility and make compost. And that mixture of herbivore manure and hay is like perfect breeding ground for bugs and ticks. Now this, in just a goat farm, is a problem, because it's actually a waste product, and it's not only a waste product, it's a potential contaminant, and it's something that can actually like harm the goats. But what we do is we clean that ticky, anaerobic, gross goat manure into the chicken house. It's like, whoa, guess what? That's all medicine and high protein feed for chickens, right? The big thing that all, you know, one of the big problems with poultry farming is that they have like very high protein requirements, so that requires like expensive feed. But we get most of our protein from the bugs that live in our goat shit. And if you want to make goat shit into really good compost, you have to turn it a lot. It needs a lot of oxygen. The chickens do that while they're sifting through it and looking for bugs and ticks. And then the real champions in the system are the pigs, because they just absolutely love to rummage and all this stuff. So we go from the chicken house into the pig house, and that's where all the waste from our restaurant goes as well. And so the pigs really get into turning the compost and eating everything that the chickens left behind. So by having an integrated system with the animals, and then all around here is like young food forest, so the chickens get to like go out and range and all that. So by having an integrated system, we not only like get to reduce our waste and improve the quality and the health of our animals, but we also, you know, keep our bills way down as well. And kind of everything is like that, and that's the big problem, really, in a sense, with modern agriculture, would be the opposite of that, right? It's like, you know, in a modern agricultural system, you'd have like 100 miles of corn or whatever, like stuff that's there, or whatever stuff they grow in a monoculture, right? So, you know, there's all kinds of problems with this system. But one of the really unfortunate things about it is, like, so you grow all this corn, there's nothing to kind of keep the fields fertile, there's no animals on the landscape at all. And then, you know, 1,000 miles away, you've got like a CFO, like a concentrated feedlot, with just hundreds of cows, and they bring the grain in, they transport it for miles, they bring it in, they feed it to the cows. They're herbivores, they really want to be eating grass, not corn, and they grow really fat because the corn makes them kind of bloated. Then they shit everywhere. They're miles from anything, you know, anywhere where that shit is usable. The farmers are lazy because it's a total pain in the ass to clean out a stable. And if you don't have anywhere to use the stuff anyway, if there's no organic farming in your area, why bother? So what they do is they put concrete floors down, the animals shit on the floor, the shit gets washed down, mixed with water, goes into a slurry pit. The slurry sits there just stinking, and all the methane and stuff just goes up into the atmosphere, and they end up like spreading it on some fields or something, but it smells horrific. And it's the opposite of that. There's zero integration, right? And an integrated system would be like, you know, you'd go, okay, let's have Let's have the cows live here. Let's surround them by nice trees and grasses. You know, and let's create again like something that looks like an ecosystem, and let's fence it off, and let's let them go here one day, here the next day, here the next day, and eat the grass like they're supposed to do, kind of. And you know, let's have them shit on top of hay, and let's section this area off here to grow organic grains or vegetables or whatever you want to do with all the extra nutrients. And so when you have an integrated system like that, where you've got trees and grasses and animals and grains growing together, well, that you get exactly that. You get the waste of one thing being the food, the input of something else. And that's a really good way to think about it always, is that every element or holon or whatever you want to think about it has inputs and outputs. And so start in your mind making, when you're designing systems, making flowcharts in your mind and going like, well, what does this thing need, and what are the excess things it produces, and start drawing arrows between things, and you'll, you know, a lot of design decisions will just get made like that. 9, use slow and small solutions. I'm all about this one. A lot of the evolution of this farm, it was like we made a bunch of mistakes, but none of them were like terribly big, catastrophic mistakes. And the good thing about making slow and small making small decisions is that's how you create like naturally smart systems. Because the idea really is you want to evolve as your project evolves. And if you're not sure what to do, like I wasn't a great builder when I started, so I just wanged a tin shack together because that was what I knew how to do, but it cost me about $50 and it gave me a free place to live, and I sort of learned a bunch about building, and then it was like a useful tool shed for a couple of years, and then eventually we took it down and we used all the lamina and the wood to do something else, you know, and it's like that's a good way of doing it. The other thing about small slow solutions is it's how you get resiliency. So one project that I'm like super excited about, that me and Kenzie and a few other people, Shad, are working on, is like a project to reduce the amount of nutrients flowing into the lake and do something about the health of the lake in general. And really what we're doing is we're taking all these different techniques that we've been doing for people for years, like these grey and black water treatment irrigation systems where we turn wastewater into kind of banana groves or bamboo groves or whatever else, or where we plant trees on steep areas that also like really helps to stop erosion and to stop overland flow, or where we, you know, take flat areas down here and we create wetlands in them. It's all doing the same thing. It's all taking water that's flowing over land and carrying nutrients with it and ending it up in the lake, and it's keeping it on the landscape for longer, right? And all of it, I think, slowly adds to the net wealth of this watershed, right? But really the vision we have with it and what we're trying to present in the funding proposal is that this is something we can work on for years. We can just, every time we see an overland flow of water, we can see if we can send it somewhere, like a wetland, like an underground irrigation trench, or we can just slowly plant trees every rainy season on the hillsides, and little by little we'll build something resilient. And compare that with the way that, with the proposal, the main proposal to save the lake is this thing, they call it the Popo Ferrico, where they want to build an underground piping system that it goes like that, puts big pipes all the way along the edge of the lake, intercepts all of the water that's flowing in there and sends it out and around and down to the coast where it goes to a huge treatment plant. And this would be a very like first world country brought down to the third world. And well, there's a couple of problems I have with it. Like one is, does that sound like a good idea based on everything you've heard to take water energy and send it out of the watershed? It couldn't be a good idea. And the second problem I have with it is it's not a small and slow solution. It's one mega solution where all of the water goes into this great big piping system that no one can get at. It'll break, it'll stop working. Then you need to get the expert out to fix it. Right, and this is kind of how water and waste is dealt with all over the developed world, and it's extraordinarily disempowering for people. Whereas if you have hundreds of grey water gardens and wetlands and forest gardens and, you know, reforested hillsides, that's really resilient. That's how, and so if one thing falls, it's not a big deal. Right? If one of these septic systems gets clogged up that services maybe 20 houses, it's like, someone can fix it, right? So slow, small solutions, they stop you making big mistakes, but they also stop you creating clunky, non-resilient systems, right? Resilient systems are like, they're like spider webs. It's like if one thread falls, it's fine. There's so many other things going on that it's not a big deal, right? 10. Use and value diversity. So again, like this is, I have to think about always how I'm going to present this stuff, because a lot of it is like, they do sort of start to repeat a little bit. So you obviously can't have a system that produces no waste if it's not diverse. Like, you would understand that by now, I think, right? And it's also, you can't have like an integrated, non-segregated system if it's not diverse. So diversity is like nature's first kind of, one of the first tools we see in nature to create these kind of integrated systems that are life supporting and life producing. But it's a good, again, it's like a really good thing to get into your head. Like, people always ask me, they're like, oh, you do permaculture, what do I do about the bugs that are eating my kale or chard? And they always expect me to be like, make this like really fancy organic pest supply. And actually, it's just like, don't do anything. Don't do anything. You almost certainly don't have enough of something, right? And so like, you saw in the evolution of the videos, like the amount, what keeps our garden healthy now is the amount of flowers and perennial vegetation and herbs that grow around the edge of it. Because what we're doing is we're trying to build up like a healthy, life-supporting ecosystem. And so it's like, well, there's something eating my cabbage. It's like, well, that thing, something will eat that thing if you chill out for a second. Right? And so it's more important to, you want to actually measure the health of your farm by the health of the predators, not by their absence. So it's like, do you have too many snails or do you not have enough ducks? Do you have too many aphids or do you not have enough ladybirds? And once you start trying to kill the aphids, this is the problem with it, is you kill 99% of them, but you kill 100% of the ladybirds. You kill the thing, always, that's the thing I was saying earlier on, like always, ladybirds have more depth and are less fundamental than aphids, right? So you'll always, the thing higher up in the food chain, the thing higher up in the complexity hierarchy is always more fragile. So when you kill, when you spray the nasty thing, even if it's like an organic nasty thing, you'll kill all of the ladybirds and 95% of the aphids, and the 5% that survive will become resistant to the thing you're spraying on the garden anyway. So it's like, that's a race to the bottom going about it that way, right? that's just a good like example of that. But really, diversity as the health of an ecosystem, but also the health of an organization and the health of a culture is a hugely important idea, right? And like, you know, you kind of see it. It's like, again, like the depressing part of modernity is like, oh, there's like all these thousands of edible plants out there and we eat 10. And then we also have this kind of like slow tendency towards like, everyone sounds the same and looks the same, and little boxes made of ticky-tacky and they all, you know, that thing. You know, and it's like, yeah, the culture that, it's again that link between culture and agriculture, right? Like the culture that just eat soy-based fucking whatever they feed you guys. You know, it's like there's no diversity in that culture. There's no diversity in the diet. There's no diversity in the culture. There's no diversity of thinking, and that's really bad. Whereas, like, what we want, I think, especially in organizations, I found this is like you want like definitely a diversity of characters. Me and my wife work really well together because we're very different, and it's like once you can start honoring those differences and like finding really good kind of creative back and forths, that's where you get like the best. And you'll see this when you guys have your design projects to work with. The most important thing actually in doing a good design is the collaboration. You know, nobody's excited to work, nobody would be excited to work with me as a designer if I was just like, you shut up, I'm a fucking permaculturalist, we're going to do this and this and this. Because the client's always like, well, can I grow beets? You know, like, you know, the more I progress on my own kind of career and like trying to build up a few different organizations, the more I see how important that one is. And then it's also really nice as a business owner to have different strands to your business. Like I always find here, it's like sometimes the consultancy business is thriving and this isn't doing so well, or sometimes within this organization the hotel is doing really well and the bar is doing kind of crap, or but there's always something. So like having a diverse, multifaceted business is also like, I think, a really good thing to develop. So go use edges and value the marginal. Okay, this is a really important one to get your head around. What's an edge? An edge is the space between two different medium. So if you have a lake and you have a beach, you also have a spot where it's lake and beach. Yeah, people love hanging out in those spaces always as well. It's more interesting to be on the edge between the lake and the beach than it is to be in the middle of the lake. Right? And like their edges are always fascinating because you have everything that can live in the lake can live there, and everything that can live in the land can live there, and there's always a bunch of stuff that only lives in the edge. So they're the most productive, interesting ecosystems and places all the time. We were just in an amazing one, the mangroves, right? Most diverse, important ecosystem in the world because it's the edge between fresh water and salt water and land and sea. So it's like they're crazy, the amount of diversity going on. There's turtles, there's loads of fish, there's sharks, there's people, there's not actually sharks, there's so many birds, so much wood, so much, and like for the sea it's incredibly important as well because all of any nutrients flowing over land get caught and turned into wood, and you know, like it's super important. And Guatemala, like look at Guatemala on a map. It's like this is Mexico here. That's the United States. And that's South America there. And Guatemala is somewhere around here, right? So Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean. Two biggest seas, two biggest bodies of water in the world. Two of the biggest land masses in the world. And then this little sliver right in between it. Amazing, right? And then within that, massive altitude changes, right? So every 10 minutes you're in a new growing zone. And then there's all this extraordinary amount of edge to it. And it's like, it's no wonder, in spite of like, we live in the age of the colonizer and the age of like, sort of the move towards just one boring global culture. And yet here there's 23 different indigenous languages still being spoken in an area the size of like Oklahoma or something, you know. And like crazy amounts of diversity for that reason. There's more by like in one 50 square meter area of Guatemala, there's more biodiversity in the entire British Isles. And that's just one area in one altitude, right? So there's like extraordinary diversity here. And then it's like a bunch of idiots trying to make it all the same and just grow African palm oil or bananas or some shit, right? Like it's just a really bad idea, because it's so hard to, like, things want to go back to being a diverse forest here so badly, and that's why it's so hard to do that kind of like monoculture style agriculture here, and you have to fight so very hard to do it. And like the marginal is like value. That someone mentioned that they had like a marginal piece of land. Who was that? Someone used that term today in their introduction. Valuing the marginal, it's like there's always like a part of a piece of land where it's like swampy or doesn't seem that great. And typically the way people manage land now is like there's this sort of like, make it all the same, like fucking drain it, it's swampy.
On my land, there's a kind of weird feature where there's like this gully where at some times of the year water comes through, but at other times of the year it's just this like empty like channel.
Yeah.
And so when I first came on, my first thought was like, oh, we have to like bulldoze this and
Right.
level it out. But now, after what I've been learning so far, it's like, wait, this is actually a really great asset
Yeah.
to the land.
Yeah, value it.
You
Value it.
really
It's a
understand.
seasonal. It's a seasonal water flow that's causing that gully, and it would be ugly and unsightly. But what you want to do with that is use the natural characteristic of that area to take water that's flowing from above, and start to see where you can harvest it and maybe move it to different sides. But you want to you want to accentuate the natural tendency of the land. You want to ride the horse in the direction it's going. That's my new motto. So yeah, like swampy areas, accentuate that. That's a beautiful, productive wetland waiting to happen. Like steep exposed slopes are like dying to be turned into observatories, and you know, like take the natural characteristics and work with them, as opposed to trying to homogenize everything. And you know, by doing a lot of these other things, you will naturally create edge and microclimate on your property, right? And we'll talk an awful lot. We'll go back to these principles a lot. Like, I don't want to dive off and go into the earthwork section now, but you'll see when we get into that, once you learn how to read a piece of land and read the topography of it, it starts to become very obvious that, like, oh, we should probably this might be a great area for a pond, and over here might be a great area for a garden. And then it's a lot about permaculture design. It's not about having ponds and having gardens. It's about having the pond interacting with the garden, you know, and the more of those beneficial interactions you can create, the better, basically. And last one is use and respond creatively to change. Change happens. It's like the one guaranteed constant in your life, or in the development of a project. I'm sure everyone had to go through it recently with the pandemic would be like a really good example of that. You know, and there's a lot more big changes coming, especially around the way the climate seems to be changing. That's going to become a big one, you know. And it's like, it's really, I think this one is just more about cultivating an attitude of like flexibility and like go with itness. We had a big change to deal with, as I imagine everyone did with the pandemic, and we got, you know, it changed the direction that our business was going in, but it actually, by sort of embracing it, we actually allowed it, it took us to a much better place than I think where we were going before that, you know. And, you know, I think just, again, like kind of cultivating an attitude of like, things are going to change and I'm going to change, and that's good, it's a much healthier way of doing it. Like planning, it's a funny thing to do, but it's like you do want to project into the future with a project, and you sort of want to like imagine, who am I going to be in 10 years? And it's like, well, I don't really know, but like, so allowing for the fact that like I'm going to change, things around me are going to change, and I want to be sort of like flexible and okay with that. And a lot of that, again, it's like, if you're doing these other principles, you're setting yourself up for being able to deal with change, you know. And it's, again, it's like the small and slow solutions, and the diverse approach, the approach that favors diversity, means that you're able to deal with change a lot better. You know, if something happens here and it's like, oh, we grow a lot of beets here, but the temperature went up like 5 degrees, we can't grow beets anymore. But it's like, all right, well, there's still probably like a bunch of other stuff we're going to be able to grow, and we're not too dependent on any one thing. So, like, it's having the attitude to be able to deal with change, but it's also like the setting up of the business and the lifestyle as a healthy ecosystem in the first place means that change is going to be much more easy to deal with than if you have this kind of like rigid, only produce one thing, only do one thing kind of, you know what I mean? Okay, so that's the 12 permaculture principles. Write them down, read them over and over again, incorporate them like into your being, and you'll never have any problems again. Kenzie, what were the bonus principles you wanted me to talk about? The problem is the solution. Okay, there's a few extra ones that don't appear on this list, but I think are just like really cool things to talk about. The problem is the solution. Jeremy had a teacher. I think this is just the best story to like illustrate this one. Jeremy had a teacher who planted a hazelnut forest in Massachusetts, and he, you know, it was like the culmination of his like work that he'd planted this food forest with hazelnuts as the peak species, and he was really excited about it. And then when the nuts started to fruit, he didn't get anything because he had all these squirrels, and they were taking all of his harvest, and they were taking all of it. And he was like, started to get pissed off and put out like poison and, you know, try to shoot them. And then eventually he was like, wait, I'm supposed to be a permaculturalist, like this can't be the freaking answer. And he started thinking about it, and he was like, well, what are they doing? They're harvesting all of them, and then they're storing them. So they're trying to stock up on food. It's a pretty understandable thing to do if you're a squirrel. And he's like, I wonder where they're storing them. And I wonder if I build them something that's better than what they have, would they start to harvest the nuts for me? And so that's what he did. So he made these, like little underground squirrel canals, and then he would just take the nuts out and put corn in, which squirrels love, and he found he was able to just like go along, open up a little door, take out his nuts, replace it with, and nuts or any nut are a pain in the ass to harvest. So suddenly he had this flock of squirrels that he just had to give a little bit of corn to, and they harvested all his nuts for him. It's a very good example of that. But again, like that's, you know, it's a thing. It's like, you know, it's like someone was saying to me, it's like, oh, but like the permaculture stuff, can it really work? Because it's like, you know, it's so labor intensive. And it's like, well, yeah, but like we have all these young people who are like overweight and unfit and like desperately need to learn something and don't have jobs. It's like, you know, and I think we had a good one this year. It was like, oh, we want to expand the amount of food we're growing, but we don't have any more land, and land here is expensive, and it's kind of hard to justify buying land at these prices just to grow vegetables on. And it's like, and we have like all of these now clients who got us to put in vegetable gardens, but they're complaining that their garden, that they're like, you know, that no, but they don't know how to maintain their gardens, and they're asking us if we can like do more of it, but we don't really want to because it's like we don't have time. And then it was like, wait, we can maintain our clients' gardens and produce more food for the restaurant, you know, at the same time. We can solve those 2 or 3 problems together, and we actually solve a bunch of problems by kind of like taking that attitude to it. You know, so that, and actually there's again, once you sort of like incorporate that into your sort of thinking and your approach to problems, to problem solving, yeah. What was the other one? Stacking functions. Yeah, this is a good one. There's a saying in permaculture, or like there's a saying in the designer's manual: every element should have at least 3 functions, and every important function should be supported by at least 3 elements. Okay, so what does that mean? And then underneath, stacking function. So an element is just like a thing on your property. And so every element, everything on your property should have like multiple functions. And every important function, so like important functions are things that we like need a lot of, should be supported by at least 3 elements. So, well, let's think about it. Let's say those chickens down there. It's like the chicken itself is an element, right? So it's like, well, what are the functions of those chickens? One is to provide protein to us, right? I like my protein, so it's like we raise chickens, and they meet. They complete that one important function. They provide protein to us and our guests and in a sustainable way. But what else do they do? Well, we put straw down under them, and we put them in an area like this, so they're building fertility for us. Yeah, and then We have their house right by a couple of gardens. So this garden there, where right now they can get into this part of the garden where there's just hay. But once we've harvested most of the veggies out there, and we want, you know, someone to go out and like clean up and fertilize, they'll do that. So there you go. That's 3 functions, and I'm sure there's a bunch more. And then it's like, okay, but there's a few. I mentioned a few important functions in that one. One is protein, right? So I don't want to just depend on those chickens to supply protein to us. We also have pigs for that. We also grow lots of beans in the rainy season. We also grow lots of pigeon pea. We also keep goats and eat the young males. So there's that important function of providing protein being met by a bunch of different elements, and each one of those elements in itself should be performing multiple functions. You see how that one works, right? You know, this structure here, it's a Irish bar. It's also a storytelling venue. It's also a permaculture teaching space. We also have baby goats living underneath, which are filling that important role of providing fertility and protein to us. We also have a huge amount of material storage for our buildings under here, and it's very safe. We also have an office where Mark lives, a room where Mark lives with solar panels on top of it. Stacking function. And so on and so forth.